I like to start every meeting by highlighting two of our core values that I feel are particularly relevant. Today, I want to highlight human hands solve human problems, and reality is known through reason. All right. Thank you so much. So our main speaker today is the Director of Development for Air Alliance Houston, Paige Powell. As a Director of Development, Paige works to foster a culture of philanthropy and engage support for AAH's mission. Her role as fundraising and volunteer engagement is a natural extension of her previous leadership of the organization's educational outreach initiatives, where she has been able to share the importance of clean air with others to encourage advocacy for the cause. She holds a degree in economics and public policy from the University of Houston. Go Coogs. She's a certified public manager, climate reality leader, and has been active among Houston's green community for over 15 years. Outside of work, Paige is a devoted mother, musician, and enjoys spending time in the great outdoors. So please welcome to the screen, Paige Powell.
Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you to our wonderful musicians. I love that pick-in. They're the great way to start your Sunday morning. I'm a member of the UU Church, and I've really been missing my community there. So I appreciate your community and your musical talents this morning. All right, well, let me see if I can start sharing my screen. So I have with us today, or I invited our communications manager, Rika, to help kind of monitor the chat. I'm gonna have a couple of questions for you. And if you just wanted to put any of your thoughts or kind of questions in there, she'll be kind of helping us manage that. Today I wanted to speak about air pollution, public health, and environmental justice. These are kind of the primary issues that we work on at Air Alliance Houston. So let's see, can everybody see my screen? Yes, good, okay, well here we go. I'm gonna start with our mission and our vision. So we envision healthy communities with clean air every day for everyone. And our mission is to reduce the public health impacts from air pollution through applied research, education, and advocacy. Let's see, there we go. We were founded as an organization as a merger between two organizations, GASP, the Galveston Houston Association for Smog Prevention, which I remember growing up in Houston as sort of an adolescent and hearing that acronym and like, wow, that's a pretty good one, right? And Mothers for Clean Air. And the two of those were sort of like a research-based. GASP was more of like industry professionals for clean air and people who had more of a chemistry background. And then Mothers for Clean Air was more of an advocacy group for, children, mothers who had children with asthma. I had asthma as a kid. I grew up in the Houston area in the 80s when the smog was really bad. And I remember being hospitalized with bronchitis and pneumonia many times over again and having to leave class to go to, or coming in from recess and having to go to the nurse's office and do a breathing treatment because the air was so bad. And fortunately, the smog issues in Houston have improved since the 80s, but we still have a long way to go, as you'll see, to really obtain air quality that's healthy for everyone. So GASP and Mothers for Clean Air merged in 2008, and that was quite a mouthful to say. So we changed the name to Air Alliance Houston, and we've been going strong ever since. So you heard a little bit about me. I'd like to know who you are. These conversations and these presentations can go many different speeds. And so if it was possible for you to just maybe drop a word or two into the chat about your background. So I know, if maybe you have a PhD in chemistry or you hold political office or you are a community organizer or maybe, just what your sort of background is. And then secondly, what is your background knowledge? So there's a poll that may have just popped up for you, hopefully, and just let me know sort of if you've been involved with this issue, if it's new to you, just so I can kind of gauge the speed of this discussion today. All right. Civil engineering, social studies, lifelong Houston residents. And it looks like a lot of you have a pretty good understanding of kind of where we're at. And maybe you've, okay. An attorney, oh, not environmental, family doctor, great. Teacher, computer science, awesome. Okay, I think we'll just give it 6 more seconds. We'll do 1 minute of polling. We're almost done. Environmental planner. Oh, there we go. That's someone. Chemical engineer. So we have a GIS analyst. Oh, that's good. So we have a lot of people here who do have a great basic knowledge or maybe more than basic knowledge of the issues. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your engagement. And oh, Deer Park. Okay. All right, cool. So moving forward, as I see it, there's 3 sort of main problems here that we're dealing with. Like there's the air pollution, there's the issue of public health and how it affects people, and then there's environmental justice. I had a 4th one on here earlier when I was making this presentation about climate change and the climate crisis. I decided to not touch that issue in this presentation today just because of our short time, but I'd be happy to field some questions about it later if you feel like we need to go down that route. Certainly the city of Houston has the state of Texas has the most carbon emissions in the United States, more than many other countries. And so we are a major contributor to the global climate crisis. All right, so to start with, there are major industrial pollution and chemical safety risks in the city of Houston, in the Houston area. We have the largest petrochemical complex in the Western Hemisphere, right in our backyards. And on average, every 6 weeks, there's some kind of a chemical fire or catastrophe in the city. I think there was one just a couple of days ago. There was a warehouse fire in southwest Houston. I know there was, you know, when you look at what happened in Beirut recently about the explosion there, it just sort of brings us back to what happened in West Texas a few years ago and the organic pesticide explosion. And then of course what happened in Texas City in the 40s. And so Houston is no stranger to chemical disasters. And that is, you know, more than unfortunate, right? It's dangerous to our health, and it shortens life expectancy and causes a whole host of ailments for the residents of the area. I think some of the bigger problems here, as you can see on the right-hand side, is that we have no systematic toxic alert notification system in place. There are a lot of issues regarding the jurisdictions that govern each of these sort of refining bodies and different industries. And because of, I guess, municipal rules and let's say the county not having ordinance making power to sort of restrict some of the operations and safety practices, we're really left to the will of the state and the federal environmental agencies to enforce a lot of what we see as problems. TCEQ, our state environmental agency, only enforces about 2 to 3% of air permit violations. This is a report that came out of the Environmental Defense Fund a couple of years ago. And hopefully Rika will be able to drop a link to that in the chat so you can look it up if you want. But if you've been in the city of Houston for any amount of time, you know that we have a pretty regular industrial pollution issues. Compounding this are the irresponsible development and transportation planning practices of the region. And so the city of Houston and the region doesn't have comprehensive zoning, and it seems like all of the expansion in planning really is automobile and car-based, car-focused. There's very limited public transportation or even safety precautions on many streets to help safeguard cyclists and pedestrians. And Houston, I mean, we're known as a car city, we're an oil town, and so more freeways, more cars, more expansion. That's just been the historical pattern of development in the region. And so this puts a lot of pedestrians, especially children, at risk, you know, if they're trying to walk to school or, you know, just go walk to the park, play in their neighborhoods, right? A lot of times there isn't adequate infrastructure to keep them safe and separate them from the automobiles for physical safety as well as their respiratory health. If you see this last bullet point here at the bottom, 80,000 Houston area children attend schools in TRAP zones, traffic related air pollution zones. And so this has a direct impact on their health, not only their respiratory health and their physical health, but air pollution can affect your cognitive development as well, and just, make you kind of not as smart as you would normally be. And then, the next component of this is that there are certain communities that bear a disproportionate burden for these risks, these health and safety risks. Generally, they are communities of color and low income, and these industrial complexes that are polluting don't really see the effect of it. It's the people who live there and don't have the resources and means to remove themselves from the situation. So it's really this disequity or this inequity issue about who's causing the problem and then who's feeling the effects of it. And it's basically Houstonians, low income, communities of color, children, vulnerable groups who are being disproportionately affected by this unchecked industrial complex, right? So this is sort of the context of where we're at and what we're up against here in the state of Texas and the city of Houston. I included this slide because I think it's important to note that air pollution doesn't just affect your lungs, although it does impact, respiration as far as asthma and other sort of lung cancers and other sort of chronic diseases are concerned. But, it can affect your brain and your central nervous system as well. It can give you anxiety. There are some recent reports that have come out that it can induce sort of violent behaviors and definitely contributes to cognitive decline. That children who are raised or grow up in areas with heavy air pollution are at least one grade level behind their peers in cleaner areas. We've also seen some preliminary indication that the death rates from like COVID are greater in areas with historically high air pollution, particularly particulate matter pollution, presumably because of the historic effects that have compromised lung function, and so lead the contractors of COVID to be more vulnerable to worsening effects and outcomes from the disease. So this last point here at the bottom, impacts on the reproductive system. It could also affect children in utero, so that they, if the mother breathes bad air, chronic air pollution exposure while she's pregnant, there could be birth defects or other sort of impairments to the child as well. So to put it lightly, air pollution is a full body experience. And it's something that I feel very passionate about, just because, it is like the literal foundation to life. We breathe more than anything else that we do, more than we drink, more than we sleep or eat. And so it's really I feel like the most important thing. So I'd like to touch on environmental justice for a bit. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the term, but environmental justice really relates to sort of the disproportionate impacts on certain communities than others, right? So here you can see a map of cancer risk from air pollution in Houston, and you can see it's heavily skewed to the east side of the city where the majority of the industry is located. And so clearly, if you have a lot of petrochemical emissions over there, you're going to have higher cancer risks from air pollution. Here's another map of life expectancy in Houston, and you can see the darker areas are a lower life expectancy, and the lighter the blue areas are a greater life expectancy. So there's a variation of, it says 23 years, but disparity of 23 years between different neighborhoods in the city of Houston, just solely based on where you live. And this isn't entirely due to air pollution. There are a number of other factors like access to healthcare and being located in a food desert and things like that. But this really just goes to show how certain communities, specifically here, the ones on the east side of town, are adversely affected, and it disproportionately so, in a number of ways, and it really all of the effects are compounded to affect all aspects of their lives. It's not just their quality of life while they're living, how they breathe, how many times they go to the doctor, whether or not they have to be on chronic medication, but even the length of their life, right? And if they're going to live that extra 20 years or not. And it really just, this is a pretty striking map, I think, for ourselves. So this map comes from EJ Screen. It's a really fantastic resource from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And EJ Screen is a tool that basically determines the environmental justice index for any given, more than county, I think it goes down to the census block, maybe census tract level. But you can see sort of the environmental justice communities in Harris County. And if you want to go to EJ Screen and play around with it, it's pretty good, especially if you like looking at maps, and you can do comparisons to the state or to the rest of the country, and you can add different environmental hazards in there and look at some of these different risks or sources of air pollution and things like that. But you can see again that sort of the same pattern where the east side of the city is more environmental justice, and all of this part here on the west and even up in the suburbs, they're just not environmental justice communities, right? So we can go into a little more discussion about that later, or perhaps in the question portion. But that's sort of the bulk of the issues, right? Sources of air pollution, the health effects, and then sort of the disproportionate impacts on communities of color and low income who are already under-resourced to sort of find solutions and handle these problems. So our solutions at Air Alliance Houston, what do we do about it, right? It's a really big issue, is basically twofold. We've got this theory of change to advance environmental justice. And then we've recently undertaken a strategic strategic planning process. I think it was finalized last summer, where we outlined our 5 strategic priority areas, and then from there have active campaigns to affect positive change in different aspects of air pollution in the city of Houston. So equity, I think all of our work is equity centered. It's at the core of all of the research that we do, all of the community organizing and advocacy work. And I think this is such a great illustration that speaks to the fact like equality is not equity, right? And those who have fewer resources really, we feel, as far as equity is concerned, deserve greater resources to compensate for sort of the unfair distribution that was initially, allocated. So here you can see, the little kid gets 2, right? And so I think what this means is like we're advocating that communities of color and low income really need that extra help to overcome some of these obstacles, because otherwise it's just not equal to say everybody needs the same resources, right? I think that's pretty clear. So this is our 3-pronged approach. Previously, Air Alliance Houston was always said we were research, education, and advocacy. Well, this is still the same thing, but we refined it a little bit more in the most recent strategic plan. And so it's equity-centered research, right? And diffusion of information. That's kind of our fancy way of saying education, but it's like we just want to take the research that we find, spread it to everyone as far and wide as we can. I think there's a lack of access to information in Houston, especially regarding air quality monitoring data. And so it's our job to try to give you the tools and give you access to some of those things that we know how to find and maybe you haven't, and or create new avenues for educational opportunities to spread the word. That's exactly what we're doing here today. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And especially in this time of COVID and all of these sort of virtual engagement events, we're looking for more opportunities to do this. So I think you'll see at the end of the presentation, I talk about engagement opportunities. And if anybody wants to sort of host a virtual house party or education event or AAH 101 to sort of introduce our work to some of your friends and colleagues and other groups, we'll be happy to do that, because that's one of my primary goals, is to just continue to spread the word about the work that we do and continue to garner engagement. And then finally, advocacy was rebranded and changed to collaborative advocacy, because so much of the work that we do, doesn't happen in a vacuum. We do it with coalition partners. We're members of a number of community groups, CEER, the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience, HPCC, the Healthy Port Communities Coalition, CEC, the Citizens Environmental Coalition. You name it. There's a home coalition. There's a whole host of coalitions that we're a part of to sort of advance different aspects of the work that we do, because we're greater than the sum of our parts. With the help of our peers, we're able to get further than we would alone. And so we think it's so important to be able to engage community members and community organizations, work together to advance our common goals. So our strategic priority areas that came out of that planning process are these 5: building healthy communities, supporting sustainable and equitable transportation, protecting against chemical disasters, monitoring our air, and mobilizing action. And I just wanted to double check my time, so I'm good. So building healthy communities. Here you see a picture of what I believe is a landfill in the middle of a neighborhood or surrounded by neighborhoods. There are lots of other sort of instances of siting, industrial siting like this. Concrete batch plants are one that have gotten a lot of sort of publicity in recent months or years. We were able to successfully, put down or dissuade a concrete batch plant from siting in Acres Homes last year, which I think had a lot to do with the fact that the mayor of Houston was from Acres Homes, and so he kind of got personally involved and took it on as a little bit of a project to sort of help with his complete communities. And we were super happy for that process. We went through, if an industry wants to get an air quality permit, right, air pollution permit, they apply to TCEQ, and then that permit notification is sort of sent out that like, hey, somebody applied to have, a facility in your area. You have 60 days or whatever the amount of time is to sort of dispute that or call for a contested case hearing, all of these different things. And so what we've been doing in the last couple of years is to identify those permits as they're being applied for, and then contact the residents within a radius of that location to let them know that this facility may be coming to their neighborhood, so that we can begin to organize them, right? And so they can speak out and use their own voices to speak to the TCEQ directly about why this facility shouldn't be located in their neighborhood, where their children play, where they grow their vegetables in the backyard, or whatever it is. There are a number of sort of local sources of air pollution. This one being the landfill, concrete batch plants, metal recycling facilities is another one where they crush and recycle metal. We think recycling metal is a great thing. We want to use our natural resources wisely, but all of the diesel trucks that line up to transport all of the machinery, all of the sort of metal particulate operating around the clock, right, is a major nuisance to the people who live and work in that area. There are a number of other nuisances. I know there was one recently, what is it, Turkey Leg Hut? Have y'all heard of that in Houston? And they're so famous for like having the best turkey legs in the city, if not, the state. I don't know. I've never had one of their turkey legs, but they put off a lot. Their smoker has horrible noxious gas and a lot of this black smoke almost round the clock. And we've gotten complaints from some of their neighbors about sort of the emissions. And because of the lack of zoning and adequate land use regulations in the city of Houston and in the region, Turkey Leg Hut is allowed to operate right next to residents. Same way that concrete batch plants go in next to schools and things like that. So this is really at the core of our primary strategic priority of building healthy communities and just allowing the residents of the city of Houston to live, work, and play in healthy places that aren't going to compromise their health. We don't think that concrete batch plants or need to go in across the fence because air pollution has no boundaries, right? It's just going to blow right over to you, go into your lungs. If it's small enough, it can cross through your lungs and get into your bloodstream. And there we go with our cancer risks, et cetera. Supporting sustainable and equitable transportation. So here you see a lovely picture of the Katy Freeway, one of the widest in the world, certainly in the United States. And that's just been sort of the answer to growing congestion over the last several decades. It's just widen the roads, add more roads. And, you know, as I say, if you build it, they will come. Expanding roads does not do anything to alleviate traffic congestion. It only allows the problem to grow. And so we believe that transportation funding needs to be allocated to multimodal options like buses and you know, light rail, bicycle lanes, even so much as like building complete streets, right? Anise Parker had her kind of complete streets initiative, and it didn't really go very far, unfortunately. So we're still working with that. I know that the city council and some people, advocacy groups, are still working on expanding complete streets and making sure that, like, if there's especially in the downtown and in highly trafficked areas, in places where you want to live and work and play, that there's adequate space for pedestrians, for people to walk with a stroller or to have a wheelchair, you know, just infrastructure that takes something other than automobiles into consideration. Along with sort of multimodal transportation, we also work on electrification, vehicle electrification. So this would include charging infrastructure for personal vehicles, as well as sort of looking at solutions perhaps on the private sector side for heavy duty electrification. The Port of Houston has a lot of pollution from the industry that operates there, but it also has a lot of pollution from the transportation aspect, right? Ships come in from overseas, they get unloaded, and so there's all of these sort of diesel drayage trucks that sort of take them from the boat onto land, and then there's all of the 18-wheelers that line up waiting for their load, and so they sit there idling for hours and hours at a time waiting, and so there's just diesel exhaust pumping out of all of these vehicles, all of these heavy duty 18-wheelers. Then they get their load and they drive off. And so now we've got another taking that diesel pollution out into the rest of the world. So there are lots of different options or sort of solutions that other port cities have looked at as far as electrifying the port operations so that we don't have those onshore emissions. And then there are other options about cargo transport, whether it be electric electric heavy duty trucks or cargo freight transport in like a rail system and things like that. So transportation of not only people but goods as well is something that we need to consider from a sustainability standpoint and an equity standpoint. And I could go into that more as well, but to be mindful of our time, I'm moving on. Protecting against chemical disasters is something that is really dear to my heart. I love the city of Houston. I've lived here for 36 years. My daughter is 10 years old, and I'm honestly concerned about her future and her safety. When you've lived here long enough and you've been through all of these chemical fires and hurricanes that have shut down the petrochemical industry, and you see sort of all of the emissions that are released before and after, it's really frightening. And as someone who understands the nature of climate change and the vulnerabilities that we have as a coastal community, I know I'm personally really concerned about a next big hurricane actually coming and hitting all of these petrochemical refineries and us seeing a larger catastrophe than we really ever have before. I know that Hurricane Ike was really bad, but it really wasn't like a hurricane, right? They say it was like, we never got the inland, we never really got the building devastation. Harvey was a tropical rain event, really. It wasn't like we didn't get the storms of a hurricane. And so we haven't seen basically the worst of it, or as bad as it can be. And so there's sort of this looming risk of the chemical industry that may or may not happen with climate change and storms. But there's also this everyday risk of like just operating and having upsets or having permitted releases of emissions into neighborhoods and into communities where they're breathing it in. I know that Baytown, Deer Park, Channelview, Pasadena, all of those on the east side, they're constantly seeing emissions from like Valero and Chevron. And, you know, I don't want to name the whole list. You can do the search yourself and see who kind of the bad actors are. I don't think it's my job right now to point them out. There's a resource called Neighborhood Witness. You can sign up, you can put your zip code in there, and they'll send you an email anytime there's an unauthorized emissions event in your neighborhood. So that's kind of helpful, and you can kind of go through, and they pull it directly from the TCEQ steers database. So the problem with that, unfortunately, is that all of these emissions events and the TCEQ database is populated by self-reported industry information. And so it's up to the facility to either give correct information, report it accurately, all of those things. There's not really any oversight in that regard. So it's only as accurate and helpful as the companies are truthful and give accurate information. So hopefully Rika can post a link to Neighborhood Witness. I know it's available from our website as well. We've recently relaunched our website. I want to say at the beginning of the year. We spent all year working on it. It's got a ton of great information that really goes into detail about all of the different campaigns that we have, all of the resources available to you to understand what the air quality is in your community when unauthorized emissions are happen, and sort of the legislative process and I guess who you can talk to about it and how do we move it forward so that we can sort of prevent some of these things from happening in the future. The toxic alert system that's listed here at the bottom is something that we and other organizations have been working on for years. It would basically be like an Amber Alert for emissions, right? And based on the geolocation of you and your phone, you would either get a text or not to say, hey, there's an emissions event, or there's whatever release, shelter in place, or, you know, whatever. It's something we've been trying to pass at the state legislature because, like I said, about the sort of interjurisdictional issues about the cities and the counties and whatnot. This is something that is best to happen from the top down. I know that the county has been working on something similar, but again, it's something that we will continue to need support from voters, from community members to push it forward. I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, we've gotten text messages about you have to wear your mask for COVID. Hopefully soon we'll be getting messages about contact tracing and things. And I, for one, would like to know if the air is dangerous outside, if there's been a toxic release of a carcinogen or a neurotoxin, and I should stay inside. Not all cities have sort of sirens outside. So anyway, toxic alert bill and system is something that one of our priorities. Here you can see an image of the regulatory monitors in the city. These are monitors by TCEQ and EPA that measure different things: particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, ozone. Although it looks like maybe it's a lot, we feel like it's not. It's inadequate for the amount of industry that we have. And so we've been working to expand community air monitoring in various neighborhoods around the city. We have purple air monitors, which measure particulate. They're pretty cheap, maybe $300, and you can put one outside of your house or at a school or something. We recently purchased a couple of really more sophisticated air monitors. They're called APIS, A-P-I-S, and they measure like 6 different things, which is multiple VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and ozone, etc. And I think we got 2 of these to put into different communities on the east side, but we're hoping to expand that network as well. And I know that the county has recently expanded its budget in pollution control significantly to include more monitoring equipment and personnel and things like that. So we're working kind of closely with the county, but also with community organizations and partners to expand and supplement the regulatory monitor network that TCEQ and EPA have in place. That's the very basic sort of foundation of what can we do about the problem. First of all, we have to know about the problem and the magnitude of the problem. And if the monitors are inadequate, or they're not always working, or they're down during a hurricane or during an emissions event, then we don't have that data to sort of back up these laws that we want to pass. So this is a really high priority as well. And then finally, mobilizing action. And this is really where we talk about sort of getting everyone involved and teaching communities to advocate for themselves. So this isn't a project of Air Alliance Houston, but a project of Denver Harbor or Magnolia Park or Eastwood or Pasadena, that we can help organize the residents in that community to teach them to become leaders and advocates for their own health and the safety of their children and their families, so that we sort of build the movement to scale, right, and grow this sort of larger body of active participants. So how can you help? Well, go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, join us, follow us on social media. This one down here, share your story, is something new that we're trying this year. Tell us how air pollution has impacted you. You know, ethical storytelling is very effective to sort of communicate the gravity of issues like air pollution, which are almost intangible. But if you can talk about how it's personally affected you or your children or your elderly parents, and how it sort of impairs some of your day-to-day life and function, it can be very cathartic, first of all, for the individual to share that. And second, you know, sharing those stories can help garner the attention of others in the movement, as well as those elected officials and policymakers who have the ability to make substantive change. So there's a forum on our website. You can share your story, be a part of that. Of course, you can donate, right? Give us some money, become a sustainer, monthly donor, major donor, individual, whatever you like. It can be as easy as designating Air Alliance Houston as your charity for Kroger card or Amazon Smile. And then this last one here, host a fundraiser. That's what I was talking about. If you want to help us spread the word and you've got 15 friends that you want to get together, we'd be happy to give a presentation and go into sort of do this overview, or go into some of the issues that really concern you and that are closer to your heart and your interests regarding, you know, your community. So I just wanted to put a little bit these upcoming events out here for you. We've got 2 webinars coming up, and they're both related to transportation initiatives on August 11th and August 19th. And so if you want to go to our website, you can sign up for either of these webinars. Hopefully Rika will be able to guide you to those links. And I think with that, that's all that I have for now. I'm gonna drop a poll into the link, and maybe when we come back after the questions, after the Q&A session, just to kind of get some feedback from you. But I think that's all I got. Hopefully I stayed within my time. And yeah.
You're good. Thank you so much, Paige.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
I'm the environmental planner, so I could let you talk forever.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to go into our breakout discussion groups real quick. In a minute, you'll see it pop up saying join discussion group whatever number, you can click join or not now if you want to step away, refill your coffee or get a drink of water or something like that. And you can use this time to say hello to other OASINs or come up with some questions for the Q&A. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, this is a great time to post your questions on Facebook Live, and we'll get them over here into Zoom. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. Okay, we got some questions during the talk. So Rika was kind of noting a lot of them, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Rika. Oh, she might be muted.
Yep.
Okay, I think now,
Okay.
now I'm unmuted. Is Paige is back here as well, right?
Yep, I'm here.
To see her. Okay, so yeah, we got a couple of questions. During your talk, I don't know how much time we have. There was one question regarding the city's heat mapping study, and then a few questions concerning idling. Do you think we have time to go through all of them right now?
Yeah, go ahead and go through.
All right. Yeah, so the first question we got was that the city of Houston is participating in a heat mapping study that is just starting. Mayor Turner seems to be a proponent. Is this a hopeful sign?
I mean, I think so. I don't know that it's going to help impact or improve air quality directly, but at least it will start to sort of shed some light on the disparities between neighborhoods and how we do have heat island effects in locations that are heavily concreted and there are lots of roads and no trees, right? And so I think this is a really good start to sort of the discussion about planting more vegetation and more sort of canopy, tree canopy to shade some of the streets, and also with the co-benefit of improving air quality. I think that's probably all that I have to say about the heat mapping. I know that when we did the health impact assessment for the I-45 expansion, that heat islands were something that was noted in that research. And so it just sort of goes to show the results of the development patterns that have been promoted in the region for the last several decades, and where are the problems and how do we sort of mitigate those issues with natural solutions. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Paige. Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably can move on to the idling questions. And so the first one we got was a comment that in the 90s, I became aware that Spring Branch school buses were idling the whole time. Kids were leaving classes and getting loaded into their bus. That was a lot of exhaustion. I think I was told that there was nothing the district could do about it. Has that changed?
So school bus idling is something that's close to my heart as well. I know that, so Air Alliance Houston a couple of years ago was able to successfully pass an anti-idling ordinance in the city of Houston, which basically made idling for more than 15 minutes at a time. And there were different conditions, right? It had to be a diesel engine over 14,000 pounds, made before 1993, or I forget the year exactly. But basically, if you had an older diesel vehicle, you weren't allowed to idle it for more than a given amount of time. And we were able to pass that ordinance, but the city basically told us that it wasn't going to be enforced. It was sort of voluntary compliance because they just didn't have the resources. Houston Police Department didn't have the resources to go around and give tickets to idling trucks when they had sort of bigger fish to fry. We also were able to work with HISD to get anti-idling bumper stickers put on all of their school buses. And so it says like engine off, this bus is not supposed to idle for more than 5 minutes at a time. Again, I think there's an issue about compliance and enforcement that like, yes, this is a great idea. And this is something that we espouse and we don't want, diesel exhaust around our children. but it's not something that's being necessarily enforced or in practice. I know that at my daughter's school a couple of years ago, maybe last year, 2 years ago, I walked into the school, there was a bus idling outside, and I spent a few minutes in there, and by the time I came back out, the bus was still idling. And so I went and knocked on the window and I said, "Hi, excuse me, can you please turn it off? I know it says no idling." And the bus driver got really defensive about being asked to turn off the engine, and said that he wouldn't do it, and that he was only going to be there for a few minutes, etc. And so I think there's possibly a disconnect a lot of times between the policies that are approved and, you know, from the top down, and the application and practice by the people who are driving the buses and things like that. I know that another recourse is for schools individually to adopt anti-idling policies. And we've worked with different PTOs and student government associations to say, kids, you are the leaders of your school. You know, put together a petition drive for all of the students and the teachers and the faculty and the parents to have your school adopt anti-idling zones and anti-idling policies. And this can be for not only the buses, but also the parents who are waiting in the carpool line. And so it's really more of a localized solution, I would say, that each school individually, if they want true compliance and enforcement, needs to have that policy at a campus level so that they can sort of monitor the enforcement of it locally. Because someone from the district isn't going to come down and do it. You really need to have individuals on the campus who have a vested interest in protecting the health of their students. There's another campaign which is probably many, many years off, but it's about electrification of school buses, which I think makes perfect sense. But again, it's a matter of resources, and do the districts that are currently underfunded have resources to buy new technology in buses? Probably not. It's not a high priority, but certainly the enforcement of an anti-idling ordinance is very minimal cost. And it's something that it's a very sort of grassroots campaign that you can work on at your school, or, you know, spread the word about. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, then we got one more that's more related to industrial sites and idling. So the question is, how can we prevent the idling of vehicles while waiting to be let into industrial or chemical sites? It's so hot in Houston that turning off the vehicles isn't really a great option. And there are often requirements to stay within your vehicles, especially if you're transporting something hazardous.
Well, I think there's two issues there. First of all, is a technological barrier, right? There has to be a way to air condition those vehicles without running the engine. I know it's feasible. Maybe I'm a futurist and I'm living in some alternate dimension, but I feel like we're using old technology, and that's, you know, not something that's out of the range of possibility that we can have the two coexist. Now, it may not be current technology, right? Say I'm a truck driver and I'm waiting in line and I don't have that available to me. You know, all I can do is kind of run my fan, you know, turn off the vehicle for 10 or 15 minutes until it becomes unbearably hot, and then start it up again. That's kind of the reality that we're living in. Again, the anti-idling ordinance that we were able to pass at the city is not being enforced, and we have not been able to pass it at a more comprehensive level because of, like I said, the sort of the interjurisdictional nature of all of these issues. We're working on passing an anti-idling ordinance through the Port Houston. There's a couple of different things there: the toxic alert system, the Port Clean Air Plan, and the anti-idling ordinance that we're working on with Healthy Port Communities Coalition and the Port of Houston. But that would be something that the port would be able to enforce on all of its sort of vendors and people who come up there. But again, it really needs to be localized issues until we get, you know, the state of Texas to bring something down, which I don't see happening. It's going to take sort of these smaller grassroots efforts to say, okay, if I'm, you know, whatever industry, you know, it's company policy that all the people waiting to get their deliveries and load up are not allowed to idle, or they're only idle for this amount of time. And here's my enforcement officer that's going to go down the line and make sure that all of these vehicles are in compliance. So it's a tough issue because nobody wants, like I said, to turn off their engines and turn off their AC in the heat. But I don't think that that's outside the realm of possibility that in the next 10 years, maybe even 5 years, that we could see a change in sort of the available technologies to improve that difficult situation.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay.
I think that is all the time we have in the main portion for Q&A, but if you would like, we kind of have a informal chat afterwards if you want to stick around a little longer and answer some more questions.
Sure.
Awesome.
I'm happy to do that. And let me just drop in this link one more time. I think I'm going to send it to, let's see, everyone. But this is a form to just say, how do we do? Was this helpful? Is there something you'd like to learn more about in the future? So, you know, we can
Awesome.
move the conversation forward in that way.
I also think Rika mentioned in the break that there's an email that anyone who has any other questions, they can email you, Air Alliance Houston at least to get those answers.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So before we have one final song from Greg and Becky, we're going to post the link to our donations to sign up for our weekly newsletter in the chat windows, both here in Zoom and on Facebook. While we're no longer meeting in a physical space, we do have fixed expenses, one of which some of y'all may have seen our new website. We're very excited about that. And we're also excited to be able to sponsor a scholarship for Secular Student Alliance this year. So if you like what we're doing and you're able, please consider donating. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here today. Special thank you to Paige Powell and Greg and Becky. Tonight, be sure and join us again for another Corona conversation, 8 p.m. with Doctors Richard Andrews and Will Judy. Please keep an eye out for our future emails, Facebook posts, meetup, however you keep in contact with us for our future gatherings. Have a great week and stay safe out there.